Action.
Just really chaos on the water at this point.
Danger.
This is no game. We're here to do a real job.
Adventure.
I've been around the world twice and I've seen everything 3 times.
You're listening to Sea Story.
Episode 11, Fire on Deck.
I'm Chief Aviation Bosun's Mate Jacob Hicks. I'm originally from Trafalgar, Indiana, and this is my sea story. I originally joined the Navy in 1997. I lived in a small town in the southern central part of Indiana. It was small town living, wasn't much to do, wasn't a lot going on. I knew I needed to do something. So I walked into a recruiting office and I joined. And that was 20 years ago at this point. And despite all the things that have happened throughout my Navy career, there's one thing that really sticks out. And I find it ironic in the events that led up to it, because prior to it happening, I was actually a firefighting instructor stationed over in Yokosuka, Japan. And my entire career, between ships stationed here in Norfolk or over an air station at Oceana, I had always been in the Tidewater region of Virginia. And when I had left the USS Harry S. Truman, I received orders to go to the firefighting school in Yokosuka, Japan. And while I was over there, even though we drill and we train and we do all these things, we teach firefighting and damage control, and we teach how to make sure that we are okay, because when we call 911, we are 911. We are the ones who are going to take care of our own problems out there, and a casualty at sea is something that no sailor ever wants to deal with. So after 3 years of teaching firefighting, I received orders to the USS Kearsarge, and when she was on deployment in 2016, she was doing a 2015-2016 deployment. We were doing flight ops as normal. Everything was going the way that it's supposed to. We were launching aircraft, we were recovering aircraft, we were doing our amphibious stuff. It's a really exciting part of being in the Navy to see those types of things. So it was a normal day of flight ops. Everything was going just the way everything normally does. Being in the fueling division, it's our job to go up there and make sure that the aircraft are topped off and ready to go. The handlers are out on deck and they're moving aircraft around, and of course everybody's down below and they're doing what they need to do to keep the ship moving. Prior to a launch, the ABFs will go up there, we'll refuel all the aircraft, we'll get them ready to go. The ordnance guys, they load them up with everything that they need. Air crew guys get the pilots ready, and then it's time to launch. So at that point, myself and the rest of my crew, we went back down below decks because we're no longer needed on deck after the refueling. Everything was normal. They launch one aircraft, get it off deck, launch a second aircraft, it's off deck, third aircraft, it's off the deck. Get down to the 5th aircraft, and when they were spinning up, ready to leave, for whatever reason, there was a disaster with the engine on this particular AV-8B, and it exploded on the flight deck. I was below decks and I had just came off the deck. All I remember hearing was this loud thud, and then the crash alarm sounded. It was kind of surreal because between training and the education we go through about this stuff, it's supposed to be an instinct that you just react to what's going on. And the surreal part about it was the fact that all we did was grab our gear and head back up. And when we got up there, there was already crews. The mobile firefighting truck we use up there was already there, putting out the fire. There were people on hose teams that were putting out this fire. I noticed a hose team was missing a hose team leader, so I ran over to that team, and I was helping them to extinguish the fire. I remember thinking to myself that in 3 years of teaching firefighting, I had always asked the question about the fire on board the USS Forrestal. I used to always wonder what was going on in the guys' heads who were on board that ship that day that they had that fire. And I remember standing there, and even though it was just instinct to do what we needed to do, to move around, to take care of this fire, I was thinking to myself what those guys were thinking. And it was the strangest sensation to actually experience that and to know that's what was going through their heads. I knew exactly what those guys were feeling that day, and in 20 years of the Navy, nothing had ever struck me as being quite as powerful. So when everything was said and done and everybody was kind of looking over what had happened, The normal flight deck crew is generally around 30 people who are standing on deck taking care of whatever needs to get done. But after the fire, we had well over 100, maybe 150 people up there. And despite all the stuff that was laying around from obviously an airplane exploding, all these bits and pieces laying around, everybody was just standing around like shocked that nobody was hurt, nobody was injured, nothing happened to anybody, everybody was just fine. And from the time that the fire ignited to the time that it was out, it was around 30 seconds. And it was a pretty big fire, that's for sure. It just was an explosion, it happened, we got it put out, and everybody was just kind of overjoyed and talking about, like, glad I went through school. Man, I'm glad we learned about that. Man, I'm glad we talk about that. Everybody was so proud of themselves for taking care of a situation that you wonder whether or not you can actually get through something. And some situations in life pop up and you say to yourself, I don't know if I would be able to do that. And then when you do it, you do 1,000 times better than you ever thought you would. Being a small town guy from Indiana, to be able to actually challenge myself and to be challenged and to constantly see that I'm bigger and I'm better at things than I would have ever imagined. Despite all the things that I've done in my career, had it not been for the Navy, there's no way I would have never found that out about myself.
Sea Story is brought to you by America's Navy. Learn more at Navy.com.